These days, anytime that we rent a car or we stay at a hotel, anytime we call an Uber or if we eat out, we are asked to hand out stars. The whole thing can feel a little bit absurd, and for me, nothing captures this absurdity better than a satirical piece in The New Yorker. It was in Shouts and Murmurs, if you're a fellow reader, from 2020, entitled "One-Star Yelp Reviews of Heaven." The writer imagines one reviewer writing, "Not a fan of the pearly white color scheme." 1 star. And another, "Let me preface this by saying I love God. I mean, God's perfect. And in my humble opinion, that's what makes heaven so disappointing, because you think, like God, what could be better than that? Nothing, of course. So yeah, big letdown." We'll do one more. "I don't know. I heard a lot about this place and everyone seems to love it, but the clouds are too soft, and you could break an ankle if you had bones. And granted, the peach cobbler, which everyone raves about, is perfect, but how much peach cobbler can you eat, really?" Did you know that if you go online, Temple Micah has ratings? We have currently a 4.9 on Google, which isn't bad. It's not bad. But I'm sorry to report that on Yelp, we have a 4.4. It's because in 2017, Aviva S came and found that our parking lot was too small. Significantly brought us down. I think all of this is hilarious, and yet living in the constant glare of ratings and reviews lures us into a habit of judgment. Our eyes are drawn to the light of the world's bright stage, where it is easy to look out and spot the flaws of others, the failures of the world, the cracks in everything. And so we judge. With eyes fixed on others, we form opinions about our neighbors, their politics, their parenting, their vacations and vocations, their schools, and sometimes their souls. We critique and congratulate our friends, scrolling through pictures, commenting and comparing. We form opinions about strangers we'll never meet, celebrities, journalists, athletes. We judge elected leaders, nations at war, the fate of democracy. And I'm pretty sure that when you leave here tonight, you're going to ask whoever you came with something like, "So what'd you make of the rabbi's sermon?" To be human is to look out on the world and praise and condemn, lift up and tear down. We sort the world into worthy and unworthy, and I know this impulse to critique, it's not necessarily destructive. It is only with eyes fixed on others that we can truly participate in the world. It is only with eyes trained outward that we can heed our prophet Micah's call to do justice and to love mercy. This much is clear. Indifference is not our inheritance. Lo tuchal hitalem, the Torah says, do not hide. We are children of prophets. To respond and critique the world is to be part of the Jewish conversation. Similar to what Elie Wiesel famously said, quotes, "To be in the window and watch people being sent to concentration camps or being attacked in the street and do nothing, that's being dead." But Jews choose life. We get out there. From Jews who marched with labor unions to settlement houses built for immigrants, from Jews who walked in Selma for civil rights to voices that cried out to free Soviet Jewry, from communities that rallied for the refugees of Darfur to Israeli aid workers rushing to the front lines of disaster all around the world again and again, we choose life. Our story has always been an outward cry for life. And right now, in this mess we're living through, we can't stay quiet. We have an obligation to speak up and to speak out. You know this. And there are urgent conversations out there that require our voice. You know the conversations about our country. How do we respond when our Enlightenment ideals of justice and human worth are eclipsed by cruelty and a disregard for decency? How do we love our neighbor when contempt tears us apart? Conversations about Israel. How do we hold fast to Israel's promise of peace when externally its neighbors try to destroy it, and internally religious zealots daily undermine the founding ideals of Zionism? How do we make room for and engage a range of viewpoints on Israel, from deep shame to profound pride? There are conversations that we need to have about anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. Will we let fear define us as Jews are gunned down in our own city and hunted in the streets of Europe? Or will we answer with dignity and defiance? How can we rely on those who have fallen silent in our time of need? There are conversations, too, we have to have about American Judaism. What is the Judaism we are creating here in this moment? How do we tell our own story alongside the American story and make it not only one of survival, but one of purpose? What Torah will we write in this place for this time? These are not side conversations. They are the questions of our time. They rise in the bright light of the public square. To turn away would be to break faith with our obligation to engage in the world. And if not here at Temple Micah, then where? A synagogue community is the place for these conversations, the place where we can learn together, share our doubts and our pain together, where we grapple with the fault lines in our world. And as I see it, no other institution is so deeply called or so uniquely equipped to be that place. And our society is starving for it, for a home where hard truths can be spoken and where we can model respectful disagreements. But certain moments in the Jewish calendar pull us away from the noise and into the shadows to face what hides within. Kol Nidre is such a moment when we stand still and enter into conversation with the truth of our own lives. If on the world's stage we do justice and love mercy, it is in the conversations we have with ourselves that we reach for the third part of Micah's call to walk humbly with our God. For judgments without humility becomes arrogance. And the path of moral courage begins in the mirror before it turns outward to the world. So tonight, we face the haunting eye within us. Tonight, we follow the words of Leviticus, Ta'anu et nafshotechem, afflict your souls. Tonight, we return to the origin of the Hebrew word for prayer, lihit palel, which means to judge oneself, to place one's life under review, not by ratings or stars, but by questions that endure. Am I living a life of integrity, or am I simply letting the days pass? What masks do I wear, and what selves hide behind them? When I am gone, what will people remember? These are terrifying, unsettling questions. We're being asked to imagine our own eulogies. We're being asked to reckon with the shadows within, because we know that life can turn in a heartbeat. Now, our rabbis knew a thing or two about the shadows within. They knew that darkness could break us, but they also knew that it could shape us. They taught in Bereshit Rabbah, quote, without the dark within, they're talking about the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, without the dark within, No one would build a house, take a spouse, or bring children into the world. So you see, our task is not to banish the shadows, but to wrestle them. I'm thinking about Jacob, Yaakov. On the night before he faced his estranged brother Esau, Vayivater Yaakov levado, he stood alone by a riverbank. No family, no possessions, only himself. And there in the dark of the night, he wrestled with his own shadow. Or consider King David. After he had cunningly taken Bathsheba and sent her husband Uriah to his death, the prophet Nathan came to him in condemnation. At that moment, David stood exposed. No crown, no soldiers, only himself. And there he wrestled with the truth of his actions. You must know times like this. These dark nights of the soul. You can't fall back to sleep. When you've lost all perspective. When our grounding slips away. Still, Jacob by dawn and David in the subsequent days both stood wounded, yet somehow made new. Only then could Jacob meet his brother. Only then could David lead again. Each found blessing not by escaping their shadows, not by fleeing guilt, but by facing what was theirs and being remade through it. And this is the pattern and the title of the sermon: Shadow, Struggle, Blessing. Kol Nidre is this kind of night. A night of shadows that unsettles what we think we know. The harsh brightness of the world's stage is replaced by a quiet, dark space. We step into the shadows of our own inner struggles. The questions turn inward. In Jewish fashion, we learn to answer a question with a question. We don't ask, is the world good? We ask, are we good? Not what is broken in the world, but what is broken in me. Not what do I deserve, but what do I owe? Not does life have meaning, but how do I bring meaning to life? Kol Nidre is this kind of night, a night that gathers us into that hidden place, each of us, to remind ourselves that our days are fleeting. Kol Nidre is this kind of night. We strip life down to its essence. We fast. We set aside comfort. Traditionally, we dress in our own burial shrouds. During the chanting of Kol Nidre, we look inside of an empty ark, and it becomes the mirror of our own mortality. It is meant to represent the coffin that all of us one day will be in. Our ancestors, too, wrestled in their nights. Kol Nidre whispered in cellars during the Inquisition, carried across the Atlantic on immigrant ships, chanted in DP camps after the Shoah. Always in the shadows of history, Jews have gathered for this night, facing what seems unbearable, yet still seeking blessing. Shadow, struggle, blessing. Now, to be sure, this confrontation with the darkest places, it's not meant to paralyze us. It's meant to awaken us. While Plato famously saw shadows as deception, a trick of the cave, Judaism turns the image inside out. Shadows are not illusion. Shadows are where truth begins. Tradition teaches that each soul is actually created in the shadow of God. We are created B'Tselem Elohim, if you know the Hebrew, in the image of God, but if read slightly differently, B'Tzel Elohim, in the shadow of God. And to live as humans is to live in constant conversation with this shadow. These dark places, the rabbis imagine, are not places God has left. They are places where God abides. It says in Psalms, we rest in the shadow of your wings. God's presence in these depths shows us that we are not helpless. And I want each of us to try to feel that tonight. We are not helpless. Even as we are mortal, even as our days pass like shadows, we have agency. The shadows are not limiting. They are filled with choice. And ultimately, we're meant to harness them for life. Shadow, struggle, blessing. Now we have a word for what I'm talking about. It's called tshuva. An idea not about guilt, but about honesty. Not about despair, but possibility. Not about self-flagellation, but a process of return, of finding our way home, even in a dark and fractured world. And importantly, return is never a solitary endeavor. The self that we address tonight, the self of which I speak of, is not a transactional self, not a material self. It's not the curated self of Instagram. It is rather a covenantal self, woven with others, responsible to family, to our community, to our country, and to God. And the covenantal self finds that the moment that we reach out for others, we find them reaching back for us, which is to say, none of us carry the years alone. This is the promise of tonight. This is the hope of tonight. That by showing up, by turning inward, and by doing so together, we elevate our lives and we sketch the selves we long to become. And as in any great work of art, it is the shadows that give us depth. The writer, Rebecca Solnit, reminds us that history is staged like a theater. The powerful, they stand in the limelight and they command our attention. But hope, she says, is not born in these bright lights. Hope lives in the shadows where nobody is watching, where quiet courage takes root, where ordinary people ask big questions and make unseen choices that over time bend the world toward mercy. Kol Nidre is not the stage, but Jacob's dark riverbank. Kol Nidre is not the stage, but David's internal struggle. Not the headlines, but the hidden wrestling of the heart. We stare into the abyss, and it shows us the abyss in ourselves. This is where renewal begins. This is where we begin on Yom Kippur. And what rises from the abyss? All of us together. And at the final breaths of this holy day, with the gates still open, with our hearts laid bare, having wrestled with ourselves, we will stand before the ark, and there in the hush where truth can be spoken, we will voice the prayers that matter most. To be held in love, to know forgiveness for ourselves and for others, to know health for ourselves and for our family, to meet our purpose. And in those final moments, we will ask for the only review that matters, that our names be remembered, that they be written in the book of life. And then, hungry yet nourished, we will cry out the final words of Ne'ilah. The shofar will sound, Havdalah will carry us back into the world, and we will step back into the light, our souls steadied, renewed by the work we have done. Shadow, struggle, blessing. This, Temple Micah, is our inheritance. May we go forward in courage, in humility, in life.